Hey, Josh, I mean, Rian, you're welcome to join if you want to, but if you've got 10 minutes, can we look through the draft that I did of the Pixie?
Sure,
Yes, we
And
can.
just
sure. Since you're here, yeah.
and then yeah, and I kind of want to get a sense of if I'm doing this correctly. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to rush into a whole lot of reviews and then find that they're crazy. Yeah.
Okay.
And Rian, if you're welcome to join, or if you're going to go and watch Wales, then I know which one
Yeah.
I'd be wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm good. I can hang for that. Then I'm going to flip back over to my speakers. Catherine's going to jump over on her machine, and I will
Yep.
put on in my microphones and earphones and everything.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Ed.
Okay. So, yeah, and one thing that came up for, I guess no, it's not your review. It's the review I'm doing, but we'll deal with that later.
Do you want to jump into my review now, or do you want to do your stuff
Yeah.
or the board? Or
Well, just sort of briefly. So without Ali here, I don't see that there's a whole lot of point in going over the queue because I
Okay.
have one that I'm working on, and I'm not going to pick anything else up until it's done. One thing that I will say that is about to change is we're now hitting the project matriculation applications where the new checklist is in effect. Oh, hey, Ali, we have an Ali. Yay.
Hello, how are you?
All right, how about yourself?
Yeah, good. A bit busy with life stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Today's meeting is all about governance reviews, since we have rather a queue, and we don't have any projects showing up asking us for specific interactive help. So one of the things I was saying is we are just starting to now get into the projects to whom the new checklist applies for matriculation. And the new checklist includes a bunch of governance things that we inserted into there. Not with the amount of depth that we have in the governance review. But there are those items in the checklist. And it feels like we need to figure out a way to arrange to get access to those if anybody's making a request based on that they're applying for graduation, right? Because there's no point in asking them questions and having them answer the same questions again, or having us research, look up things that were already in their general matriculation guideline. So but that does not include Pixie, which is the one that Ed's working on. So
yeah, hi Ali, we haven't met yet. My name's Ed Robinson. I've just Emily said I talked to Emily Fox, just asking what can I do to help out somewhere within the giant machine that is CNCF Kubernetes. She suggested that I join this group here. I think possibly so I can learn stuff, and also because I can probably contribute as well. So 2 weeks ago, I joined the first meeting. Last week, Josh and I sat down and he showed me how to do reviews, and I've drafted the first one into a document, a Google Doc, which is in the chat here. But I really appreciate just some time just to go over that, just to make sure my process is sound, and my findings are sound. I'm not really, I'm not a power user of GitHub.
Yeah, nice.
Nice to meet you too.
Recording 2 weeks ago. You are working on OpenEBS, if I remember correctly, or
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I just joined. So my background, actually, I don't really feel comfortable talking about my background on a recorded meeting, but 6 months ago, I joined a company called Datacore. Datacore is the corporate sponsor of OpenEBS, and I have a background in both commercial companies and in open source. So I see myself as someone able to make a bridge there. So I'm doing what I can. The company Datacore has the right intentions, but hasn't always quite known the right way to go about things with open source. So I'm helping there, and so yeah, we're about to get that hopefully approved back into Sandbox, and then do the right things for the governance to make sure that it can move towards graduation as well. Yeah. Nice to meet you, Ali.
yeah, nice to meet you. So to introduce myself, so I work for Red Hat. I'm in my day job, I'm working on Knative project, if you have heard of it.
Yeah.
So I'm a maintainer there, and also I'm contributing to this tag and also the mentoring working group. So this working group and the mentoring working group. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it.
Oh, and whereabouts, what time zone are you in, Ali?
I live in Istanbul, so I'm
Okay.
GM or UTC +3. No,
Okay.
-3, +3, yeah.
I'm in my accent's from New Zealand originally, but I live in San Francisco, so I'm in the Pacific time zone.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we take Josh? Is it okay to take 10 minutes? We'll go through what I did on
Yeah.
the.
You want to share your screen?
Yeah,
Can you
sure,
share your
I can do
screen?
that. Yep, I can.
Can you
Okay.
also put the link again in the chat? I joined late, I don't see it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, sure. Hold on. I'm just getting a permissions error doing that. Let me just try. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the first time I've done it with share my screen via Zoom, so I have to quit and restart. So maybe it's easier if we just bring the document up and go through it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so just let me know when everyone's got it on their screens. Or Rihanna, are you able to do it from your location?
I'm actually interested. Oh, well, there we go. Okay.
Okay,
I
cool.
just heard, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So we can skip past the header stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what I did is I opened up all the project files, looked at their website, went through everything. This is a week ago, so I can't quite remember exactly what docs I looked at. But I tried to figure out how I use the approach of looking at how they're recording their governance and then just making sure that all of the steps are in place for assigning people, for making sure they're performing to their SLAs, and then how to remove people as well. And I look for that conflict resolution, like how do you get rid of people who don't want to go if you need them to go. And so that's kind of the approach that I took. And then I also took on Josh's comment of if you've got a brand new person coming into a project wanting to get on the contributor ladder to become a maintainer, is it really clear to them what is the first step they take? So that's where I started on that. So the governance description, if I summarize it, they've got a governance board with 2 maintainers, 2 contributors, 2 end users, which is a really good idea. And the board makes decisions on scope, vision, direction, collaborations. it's unclear exactly how somebody becomes a governance board member. Like, what is the email address, or do they do it on GitHub? They open a pull request, or what exactly do they do to get started? It's not exactly clear where the list of governance board members are, and it looks like there is they haven't formalized how decisions are made, and they haven't formalized how decisions from the governance board, if they're in conflict with the maintainers. This is a kind of a standard governance versus operations thing, where maintainers want to do something, governance wants to do something else. There's conflict there. Who wins? What's the rules in place there? So that stuff's not clearly laid out in the documentation. Really similar issue with the maintainers. It kind of reads as though there's a group of people who know each other quite well as maintainers, and there is a section in there. There's a couple of sections in there. One of them is that we will never vote out a maintainer. There is that one, unless they've violated the principles of Pixie Community, but we're not listing out what the principles of Pixie Community are. And so I think a little bit more color, a little bit more flesh, a little bit more detail in this document would be really useful. I mean, it reads like they want to be nice people, and it reads like they want to do well by their Pixie Nauts, but they also have to. I know for me, if I was to become a maintainer, I'd want to make sure that the standards that I hold myself to are being applied to everyone else as well. So that's the main thing that I saw in that pure governance. Then I looked at just the other hygiene factors. So discoverability, stuff's easy to find. Project purpose, easy to find. Maintainer list, good. Code of conduct, good. Contributor guide, it's good, except for the section on if I want to become a contributor, exactly what I do to get started. That could use a little bit more friendly help in there. The ladder, again, as we talked about in the maintainer life cycle, not quite so clear. And the decision making, it's difficult to understand. I don't see any documentation of like maintainer meetings or decisions or decision points. I couldn't see it anywhere. And that's the same with the communications and meetings. It's not clear that there's a public record of meetings. Kind of one indicator, there's 2 Slack channels. One of them goes to Pixie's own Slack channel. The other one links to the CNCF Slack channel, and that invite a link 404 to me. So it felt like that wasn't quite as inviting as it should be. Just jump in if you want to make any questions. So I looked through all of the projects just to really clear, like, has it got a README? Has it got a, do we have the ownership and operations, standing bodies, if it's alignment? It's mostly okay. There's a little bit in there like the Pixie demos and Pixie plugins, which look like they really are promoting a community contributions, and it's not 100% clear how I contribute something and how that's triaged and how it's decided upon whether it's included. So that's listed in that section. If we go down, I just for the operation, I just decided wasn't quite sure what to do here. So what I did is I just got a random PR and looked through it just to see if it's got the DCO, whether it's been documented properly, if it's got a reviewers. DCO is good, documentation is good, but there were no reviewers on it. And I'm not sure if that's a showstopper or not. The projects all look fresh, they look well maintained. I can't really tell if there is governance drift from where it had started. And going down, maintainer list of current. And if I look at my governance finding table, this is, I guess, is the key thing at the bottom of the doc. So really the governance board role is unclear. This was a showstopper to me. It's not, if I was in the governance board, I kind of want to know what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do, what the scope of my influence and responsibilities are. It's like a board. I see that sort of like a board of directors for commercial organization or a foundation. So that's only going to open conflict between, especially if a maintainer becomes a governor, a board member. And there's an old saying: you never want to be a butler to someone who's been a butler themselves. So if you're a maintainer going to the governance board, you're only going to see problems and want to interfere with the maintainers. The life cycle for how people get onto that board, how they remain a member, how they are removed, that's incomplete. The maintainer life cycle, there's no documentation for the voting in, voting out, or requirements. The governance document itself doesn't have change control. A document, it doesn't say anything in there about any changes to the governance itself must be approved by supermajority or majority of the maintainers. And the contributor ladder itself is, it looks like they want to do the right things, but they just haven't completely documented how you would move up the contributor ladder and how you become a maintainer. So anyway, that's the stuff that the end of what I've done, but I'm trying to walk you through my thinking for how I looked at this. So open for any ideas. And again, I've got pretty thick skin, so if you guys want to say anything, I'm happy to take it on board.
I mean, number one, I just want to say this is excellent. You really went through and looked up a whole bunch of stuff. This is most of what we need to do for a report here. And most of, I think, what Pixie wants, because Pixie wants this feedback, because this is after they overhauled their governance, right? Because previously they didn't have a board at all, right? And maintainers were based on who a single person appointed. So they're going to want all of this feedback. You know, one of the things I haven't gotten to is I want to go through and I want to actually double check some things, just because, you know, we did only spend an hour and 15 minutes together, and I know other places to look for things. But I mean, these are sort of the key things here. One question that I have is, you know, they have this board, they have this group of maintainers and stuff. Is all of that staffed? Like, do they have people in all of these positions right now?
I'm not sure. Like, if we look at the governance, I mean, the maintainers are staffed, and the maintainers got a diverse group of people in there. If you look at the governance, they note that they're recruiting for 2 people from. Sorry, I did this a week ago, so I'm just trying to remember. They note that they're recruiting for 2 people from the community, but it's not clear how those people apply, and then it's not clear who else is on the governance board.
Okay.
I mean, I'm guessing they can just put that into the maintainers document or create another document called governance or something like that. But yeah, it's not at all clear who's on the board. Oh, by the way, Josh, I'm sorry, I didn't version the documents. I know I meant to put in the exact version of the docs, and I just did.
Okay.
I'm
not worried about that at this stage. Oh, you mean the version of the links? Yeah, that's a chronic problem. And you know, we're still struggling with this, Ali, is that there isn't a good route within GitHub to get to a particular check-in version of documents. Like, it is literally 3 minutes per document to find that link. And I haven't been doing it either for the same reason. Like, I understand the importance of having specific versions of documents, but GitHub just makes it way too difficult.
I don't think GitHub's super friendly for writing documentation and for finding docs. Yeah.
Oh, that's true in general, but it's just particularly like if you have the current version of a document, there isn't a good way to get to the version of that document at a particular commit.
I guess you could write a macro to do it. In my the one piece of code that I do is I'm pretty good at writing macros. Sorry, I know you guys are laughing at me because no one takes that seriously. But I could do like a macro that could connect to the GitHub API, just pull out like, for example, the governance doc and the latest version and put it in there or something like that. I'll
Hey,
think
if you can
about it
get that
later.
to work.
And then either pump that into you know, for starters, you know, I don't always take things one step at a time. For starters, even putting it to Google Doc, I think would be good, right? Okay, I'll think about that in my nights and weekends. The Josh, things got a bit loose down towards the second half of like the governance. Sorry, this is feedback on just me trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
The first half is pretty easy because it's quite directive of
Mhm.
that review. But as we get down to governance drift, ownership, that's you know, that really requires you almost doing a previous review to actually be able to come back. So it would have to have some continuity. Like, and I can imagine that if I was to review them in a year's time, I could look back at my old review and go, okay, I remember these guys, they're doing this, you know. But if I was to review something that you had done or Ali had done, or even Rian,
Mhm.
I'd probably be challenged to give quantitative feedback for how things have changed.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems with governance drift, we don't actually have good examples of documented governance drift, because most of the time when we get to that section, we say, hey, we can't determine whether or not governance drift is taking place because y'all have not kept records of like your steering committee meetings, right?
Yeah.
Which I guess is a form of drift in its own, right? Because the steering committee meetings are supposed to have records. But that's as much as we can say about it, right? The steering committee meetings might not have been happening, but we don't know. The so the yeah, so and that's often what I think we're going to have there. The okay, yeah, and we didn't get down to things like ownership settings. And one of our issues there is going to be if the project is not using any of the ownership tools, there's no good way for us to determine that. We would actually need to turn it over to the CNCF staff.
When you say but what do you mean when you say ownership has many different meanings?
So
Do you mean
yeah,
the licenses or
yeah,
something else?
No. We're talking about ownership of the repositories. And one of the things that's come up in another project recently is we really should also be looking at ownership of other project assets. But there's really not a good way for us to do that. And that's actually kind of a challenge and something we should probably note to the TOC as a place where the goals of the governance review and the reality of the governance review diverge, right? Because, you know, if a project is using, because here's the issue with like repositories, right? Which is for the project's repositories, the listed maintainers or other leadership should be the ones who own that repository as far as GitHub is concerned. And there shouldn't be anyone else, right? Because we see two anti-patterns there, right? One is where people are ostensibly given maintainer status, but they don't have any actual ownership, which means they're not really maintainers. And this is particularly an issue when people are trying to meet the previous diversity requirement to make their project look like it's been more successful at recruiting maintainers than it has been. You know, or alternately, they're just being sloppy about, you know, onboarding, which is its own problem, right? You know, they're not successfully onboarding maintainers if they're not giving them permissions. The second thing is, and that's a more common problem, is there shouldn't be anybody owning those repos who is not a maintainer or other official project leadership. Because one of the things that happens all the time is for projects that have a single sponsor and were contributed to the CNCF, there are people who are, say, management at the original sponsoring company who have ownership rights in the repo, and the project never gets around to taking those people off. And that's both a governance problem and a security liability, right? So the problem is that obviously ownership information in a GitHub repo is private. So if the project is using an ownership management system like Sheriff, which is the thing officially supported by the staff, or if they already have Prow implemented, they might be using the Kubernetes thing, whose name is just escaping me at the moment. So that's one of the first things that we report on, right? Is whether or not they're using a tool for management, right? One of the things we should find out from the staff is what's the file we look for to determine if they're using Sheriff.
I was gonna ask, is there any project that you know uses Sheriff in CNCF? Or any other ownership tool?
Well, there's several projects using the Kubernetes stack.
Okay.
Rian, how many projects do we have that are on Sheriff? Any idea?
I don't know, but Sheriff is strongly encouraged. I think it's actually part of the onboarding now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So newer projects should be using Sheriff. Yeah, because if they're using an ownership system, particularly if it's Sheriff, which is governed by the CNCF staff, then I think we can be reasonably confident that the ownership issues are handled, at least as far as repositories are concerned. If they're not using tools, then if they're not using tools, then we can report that they're not using tools, but we don't know if there's an actual problem, if you follow me, because we can't actually see who the owners of the repo are. The CNCF staff can see that by using their admin access on GitHub. But I don't know at what stage we would make that request, or if somebody else needs to make that request. Ownership is one of those areas where we overlap with tag security, because asset ownership is both a governance concern and a security concern. So most of what we're going to be reporting on here is whether or not they're using management tools. And if they are using management tools, particularly Prow, we can actually take a look and see whether or not that matches their governance, right? Or whether they've been sloppy about updating stuff, which is usually the reason for it not to match, right? Because if you use Prow, you have a whole bunch of owners files. You can check who's in the owners files. If that doesn't match the list of maintainers, the reason is usually that they haven't kept it up to date. And that would just be something to call out.
So Josh, is it just thinking from a governance perspective, for this tag here, the critical, I would imagine that the critical thing is that somewhere in the governance document there would be a section, or there'll be somewhere the thing which concerns us is that the project intends to make the ownership CNCF, and if there are any files that are missing, that feels like that would be more of a, it's like an execution strategy difference, or I'm not sure, but
yeah, well, and particularly, yeah, and particularly, right, like, so we're looking for two things, right? One is, does the project have written governance that's reasonably complete, right, and that falls in line with CNCF principles of openness, right? Second thing is, are they actually executing that governance, right? And this ownership thing is part of executing that governance, right? Because by CNCF definition, the maintainers or their analog should be the owners of the project repository, right? That's what being a maintainer means, is you have ownership. And so if the list of owners of the project repository is a different list than the maintainers, then we have an execution problem. We don't know the cause of that problem, but it is clearly a failure to execute. Now, one of the things that I have no idea how to tackle that's come up in the context of a problem project in the CNCF is that repositories are not the only thing that projects own, right? Like projects can have YouTube channels, social media accounts, etc. And the ownership of that can also be broken. Where, for example, say the project's YouTube channel actually personally belongs to a former maintainer of the project. And it almost feels like the ownership thing should be taken, aside from looking about whether or not they're using ownership management tools, should be taken almost out of our report and turned over to being something that the staff has to review, because we just don't have access. So having been through a couple of these, because I'll point out, your report is only the 5th one we've done. And I think one of the things that we're learning through this in the open ownership thing is that honestly needs to be a separate item, aside from we put a thing in our review called ownership management that just cites whether or not we're using tools, whether or not ownership is clearly spelled out. One of the problems we run into when we look at sub-projects is it's not clear what the sub-projects are supposed to own. That's often a problem, right? Because often sub-projects have their own repositories, but it's not spelled out anymore what repositories those are. And so how would somebody new who wants to submit a PR know whether they're approaching the sub-project or some other group? Rian?
So the interesting thing with Ali just said that for Knative, they still don't know who owns a Google Analytics account. You know, for GA4 or for YouTube, can we? I don't know if we, from the outside, as you review things, like you can tell that the YouTube channel exists, and you can probably tell that there's a GA4 link on there, or a tag manager or something, but we can't determine if it's a maintain. Like we can't determine who owns it, right? From the outside, yeah.
I mean, even with the tag, so we actually tried to find who owns the Google Analytics account, the tag we were using. There were some people from Google, maybe they have some special access or something, I don't know. But we still were not able to find it. So I think we need to use a new account.
Yeah, I'm guessing almost every project either has or will have this problem. We have a similar thing with the OpenEBS project that OpenEBS.io email account goes to some ex-employee, and not even a maintainer, but just an expert, the person who set it up. I'm trying to wrestle that one back at the moment.
So something that I've thrown into the chat just now is the landscape file. So that's kind of intersecting a little bit with the work that I do with the CNCF. So a lot of projects neglect the landscape file, and they actually do not update the information in the landscape. So you could actually include that, because the landscape update is one of the requirements when you want to join this as part of the onboarding as a sandbox. So we probably can't have it as a checklist item for joining as a sandbox, but we should definitely have it as a checklist item for moving levels when you move up to it, because very few of them, which I personally have an effort to try and get resolved, very few of them actually list their tag. So if they're under extras, you could do line 23 that says extras. Under there, you can actually do tag : and if you search for tag : I'll tell you there is very few projects, and most of them I fixed recently. Not like that. Do it like that.
I didn't even know that this YAML file, that this file existed.
So there's only 39 projects that have, out of the 200 that have them. So if you search for this in the file, you'll see there's 39 entries, and only those 39 projects actually list their tag, which is important for. So I actually wrote an article for the Linux Foundation of the CNCF newsletter, all about know your tag. And the know your tag thing is, if you don't know who your tag is, how on earth would you get them to evaluate your progress moving towards a new level? So I actually brought that up again also today in the what's the working group that Karina is spearheading? Let me find it on the calendar. Domain Technical Review group. So I brought it up there as well. So this could be a very good thing to check. And then it doesn't tell you about the ownership, but at least it gets the tag to programmatically, or the project to programmatically indicate this is my YouTube channel, this is my communication, this is my website, this is my service. Should be a, not sure if I'm derailing or whether I'm helping.
No, I think that's really that. So what you're saying, as I listen to you, I'm sorry, Josh, for I don't mean to jump over you. That because the more that we can get the projects to fill out this information, the better, right? Right. So that the workload as they're applying for the governance review. But it feels like listening to you, there's internal resources and external resources. Internal meaning CNCF requirements like the landscape YAML file. Then the external ones is things like social media, SOCMed and other. And it would be good to have. It would be good that as I'm reviewing Pixie, that I didn't have to go and look on YouTube and find where to find this. Is it under the? Is it as part of New Relic?
I'm not sure that you even can. I mean, for a lot of that stuff, I don't think you even can look.
But even before the ownership, or the ownership is important, but there's another thing of just actually checking them out, right, and making sure it's not a somebody hasn't taken the Twitter account and is using it to redirect to some information that doesn't comply with the CNCF code of conduct, for example.
And that's why I'm saying when we talk about this ownership thing is it's almost turning into an entirely separate audit. If you follow me, and a lot of it is outside of what we care about for a governance review. Which means I think we should discuss this with the TOC. And probably we actually want to limit that section of our governance review to saying, whether or not they are apparently using ownership management tools, at least within GitHub, and to the extent that we can see it, whether or not the ownership listed there matches, their listed governance, which is really the sort of narrow concern within the governance review, right? Is to the extent that we can determine it, is their governance being executed where when somebody becomes a project leader, they also get ownership? And in a lot of cases, we'll say we cannot determine this.
Yeah, because you don't want to do a half job. Like if we certify that we've checked the ownership and everything checks out, but we know ourselves that we've only done a partial analysis of it, then that's counterproductive, right? There's ways that people could spoof things then. And they've got a tick box from us, but really haven't earned that. Josh, back on my Pixie review. So if everyone's kind of happy that this is the right approach, I'll go and follow out some findings at the top and then ping you and let you know when it's ready for your review.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. So
I was gonna suggest maybe instead of this PR as like this random PR, which was closed, maybe you can actually check another one which is merged. I mean, in addition to that one, would that be okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could just choose around. And again, Ali, I'm sorry, I'm not a. I do all this via the web interface as opposed to.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I could look at a PR
Yeah,
that's
and
merged.
yeah,
I'm embarrassed about that.
and
but yeah.
actually, one of the other things. So, and this is one where when we had our discussion is sometimes we have extra context around these projects, right? And in this case with Pixie, we do, which is that they're moving away from a single leader structure to a more democratic structure. And one of the things, actually go back to the listing of PRs that are merged.
Mm-hmm. Second.
So if you look at it, scroll down some here. Wait, which repo is this?
This is Pixie.io Pixie.
Okay.
This is their main code.
Yeah. I mean, one of the problems I think they're having with the project is, at least, I would look at this, and then the other thing I would do is go over to DevStats. Because looking at the list of merged stuff, it appears that the vast majority of PRs all come from one person.
Yeah.
So, this is Knative.
Bigger.
Okay. Yeah, and actually do it for, like, say, the last 6 months. Okay, that's very interesting because last 6 months and lifetime appear very differently. Yeah, because
I felt like they had more PRs. Have lots of PRs, like 53.
yeah, but they go back more than 6 months.
Oh, right. Okay.
So
yeah,
what I actually find interesting is, and this may be what they're talking about, needing to get away from the single leader, is that I don't know who that single leader was, but I'm actually wondering here if it was James Bartlett, because one of the big things that we see here is that for quite a while, James Bartlett was apparently the #1 contributor to the project, and then they stopped. So, but the they do have a thing going on where, one of the things I often look at for their list of maintainers is, and this would particularly be a concern for Pixie, right? Because they don't remove maintainers for inactivity. So that if somebody can be listed as a maintainer, they cannot have contributed a single thing to the project for 2 years, and they're still listed as a maintainer, unless that's part of those Pixie principles that are not written down anywhere.
Hey, that's a really good point. That's a really good point, Josh. That
and
one
so then one of the things,
do that.
Yeah, and one of the things I would do from there is look in DevStats and say, hey, do they in fact have maintainers that have not been active for some time, right? Because one of the things that we've discovered before with other projects, and this is a risk factor for the project, right, is a project is a listing of 8 maintainers. But if you actually look at the stats, you discover only 2 of those maintainers are doing anything. And then if those 2 maintainers leave, the project's in crisis. And so it's something we always look for on projects, is to say, hey, hey, you have this list of 10 maintainers, but only 2 of them actually are doing work on the project, which means really you only have 2 maintainers. And that's actually a critical risk for the project. On top of which you should consider adopting a rule that says that, you don't stay a maintainer if you're not doing, doing PRs and reviews, right? So
Yeah, and then for the not doing PRs and reviews need to also have some sort of a time frame of 12 months or 2 years, and then also a method for do we have an annual review of maintainers, or do we? Well, yeah, there would be some sort of a check.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things that I'm going to do that we did not get to in our discussion, Ed, that I'm going to go back to, is if we scroll down to findings, which is a lot of these findings are not critical because Pixie's applying for incubating, not graduated. Our expectations are lower on graduated. For an incubating project, we expect for them to have some kind of open governance, but we don't expect them to necessarily be executing well on it yet. Because the important thing about that critical thing in the findings table is normally if we mark something as critical, this is something that is going to block their advancement as a project, right? It's something they must fix before they get advanced.
So Josh, totally get it. Yeah, if I'm saying critical in here, I'm saying you guys have to change this before you're allowed to go into incubating, which doesn't seem the right thing to do.
Right.
At the same time, how do we indicate to them something that's like medium, or how we indicate to them this is medium now, but you're going to need to fix it before you go to graduation? You know what I mean?
That's why we have that recommendation section.
Right. Okay.
Right. So the recommendation section, we would say, hey, we found a lot of issues with the governance, all of which would need to be resolved before you make it to graduation. Right. And here's our suggestions on how to resolve those things. Right. And because the sort of governance chaos, the governance problems that they have are not necessarily going to be a blocker for them getting to incubation, right? Their previous governance structure that was all of these powers devolved to one person might have. I don't actually know our policy on that. We might not have one.
Was there a spreadsheet for this, or do I make something else? Was there a spreadsheet like this is important for graduation, that is important for?
There's the checklist. Hold on.
Yeah.
And we did move stuff around for the checklist. So we should see what's actually on the checklist, which is oof, okay. I always have a lot of trouble finding this. Yeah, because we really should be now that we're actually getting to projects, getting to matriculation applications to which the new checklist applies. We should see what's on the new checklist, because maybe some of these things are, and they are therefore critical. Because under the old incubation, those would not have been critical. But I'm having trouble finding it right now.
there's going to be this balance for this group. I'm sorry, I'm the new guy, and I don't mean to be just throwing in ideas all the time. I'm trying just to do some work instead.
Please throw in ideas. Please
One
throw
of
in
the-
ideas.
One of the challenges is going to be to make these reviews fast enough that we can turn them around in like an hour
Yeah.
or an hour and a half or something. Because my sense is, you know, going back 5 or 6 years ago, the incoming wouldn't be that much, but now there's Kubernetes is at that point where the incoming is just there's a groundswell.
Yeah, on the other hand, so there's both. Well, I mean, more I actually would like to spend less time on a look at this document and give comments on it, and more time on trying to figure out execution. Like one of the things I would love to do for governance reviews is actually interview a couple of project members and see how they feel about the governance. Because, I mean, one thing we're missing entirely is oh yeah, it says that on paper, but you know, we haven't actually, you know, but actually this individual person decides everything. And we've definitely have not had time for that level of follow-up. Because in a lot of ways, because if you look at it, for example, for the security review for graduating projects takes a significant amount of time. On the other hand, we have contractors that handle the time-consuming part of that, which we don't have for governance review. So the the original idea that Ollie has put a lot of work into is having the project themselves do a lot more of the early state of the review. And that has a double benefit. It saves us work, and on top of which, in the process of the project going over all of their own governance stuff, they would end up fixing things, right? Because they would see that a particular document can't be found, or they would see that a particular document doesn't have anything about change management, and fix that before we even look at it, right? Because the goal here is for them to improve their governance, not necessarily to disqualify them from anything. And Ollie put a bunch of work into a more complete self-assessment guide, and then we passed the new checklist, which means that the self-assessment guide needs to be revised, and it's been kind of stuck in that state for a while.
Yeah, I just realized it has been 1 year that we started working on this, which is a long time. But can we continue with this work now? I don't remember what we were waiting for.
Pretty much it was you got this, we had a whole bunch of stuff filled in, I was working on edits, and then we passed the new checklist. Okay. And then I'm like, crap, we need to go back and we need to actually make it match up with the new checklist. Okay. And you know, particularly because we're going to have now 2 sections of, hey, here's what goes into the main checklist and how you fill that out. And then here's the rest of the information we need for the self-assessment. Now you fill that out.
So if I have that checklist, maybe I can continue working on this.
Yeah.
And I don't know when, but yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things that we didn't get to, Ed, by the way, when we were doing our run through before, was the maintainer section. And there's one other really important part that we look at in the maintainer section, particularly for graduated projects, less so for incubating projects. In this case, we just look at it for Pixie, for example, we would say, hey, we have no data on this, which is whether or not they've had maintainer turnover. And you know, because we're looking for, hey, has the project demonstrated a track record of maintainers leaving and being replaced? Because a project that has not done that is a risk. Because no matter what they have in their governance documentation, if they've never promoted a new maintainer, we don't know that they actually are able to do so regardless of what they have in governance paperwork.
So we're looking for an emeritus file, or
you're looking for an emeritus status, and we're looking for we're actually honestly more concerned about the addition of maintainers than the removal. Because like the critical thing is, you know, again, We don't want a project to get to graduate, and then have their founding maintainers leave and be in panic mode.
So we're looking for a PR on new maintainers.
So you'd look at the maintainers file and look at the history of that file. For example, that's the easiest way to check. And again, this is a place where we need more of a written guide for us. But in the self-assessment guide, we can have this for the individual projects and say, hey, just point us to evidence that maintainers have, gone emeritus and new maintainers have been promoted. And this can be your GitHub history file. That's completely valid as a way of doing that. Because we just want to know that they've been able to actually replace people. Because if they haven't been able to replace people, that's a risk.
Okay, I'll look at that.
Yeah. So, So yeah, and there's some things that we're always going to have somebody from our committee take a look at, right? Which is to say, hey, let's look at the government's main governance documentation and see what the level of quality is there, right? Because, particularly like if there's major bits of information missing, the project's generally not going to spot that, because if they knew they were missing, they would have added them in the first place. So, because I forget which project I just recently had this conversation with, where I said, hey, I know you all have a weekly community meeting, but I literally cannot find any information on how to join that meeting anywhere. And they're like, no, of course it's there. It's right there in the README. Like, no, it's not. And they're like, wait, oh. And it turns out that they submitted a PR against the README like a year and a half ago and never merged it. So but it would be nice to eliminate a lot of the other sort of research work by just having the project supply us with the information. And we get part of that through the template that we have for the governance request right now, but we really need to have the full self-assessment guide. So.
Yeah, it's a start,
Okay.
right? And we improve on it. I mean, you guys are
Yep.
putting time into this, and it's improving the way that people. Well, it's improving how people. It's improving the understanding for people of what governance looks like, and B, hopefully it's improving things for CNCF and for the whole Kubernetes community as well. So one step at a time, right?
Thanks for the feedback, by the way, Ed. I just created this issue.
Okay.
And if you have any more, you can also.
I am EdRob999, by the way.
Okay.
Right? Yes.
I always have a dog in the background. My dog's over there at the moment. Hey, thanks everyone. I'll jump off.
Yeah, cool.
I'll jump
yeah,
off
we're
now.
at time anyway. So thanks for this. This was very useful.
I'll get this one baked and then
okay.
And
yeah,
then I'm
and I'll
happy
go
to help
through
out
with
the board. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ali or I will go through with an edit run too.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can figure out some macros that can extract those versions for those documents as well. I know there is a way to do it. I'm not a very good programmer.
Okay.
I'm more of a hacker, but I'll give it a go. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks.
To convert to Markdown, there's a tool. Let me paste it in the chat. Josh, you can leave, I guess. 1 second, if I can find the link. Yeah.
Convert docs to Markdown.
Yep. I mean, if you didn't know about this, because
Yeah.
in the end,
Oh, this is just a website. This is cool.
yeah, I mean, just paste it. I mean, in the end, it doesn't do much, but it helps a little.
It does what it needs to do.
Yeah, it creates something like this, which still needs some editing, like you need to remove this and these additional anchors and stuff like that, but still kind of helps. Because of we need a PR for this, like we need a PR in Markdown format for the governance
Yeah.
view. Or I don't know, maybe you talked about with Josh, maybe he's gonna do it or something, I don't know.
Oh no, I did this in he suggested I do this in a Google Doc first of all, just I think mainly because
Yeah,
it's the first one that I've done. So you know,
yeah, it's much easier to
Um,
collaborate in Google Docs. So let's continue collaborating, and when you and Josh you're working together, I think when you think all good, then yeah, then
yeah,
we can
we'll do that.
PR later. But don't
Hey,
worry about it.
nice to meet you, Ali.
Yeah,
Take
you too.
care, and we'll talk to you in the. It's late there if you're on Istanbul time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Adios. Bye.
See you.